Hey, Colin. What's going on, man? What you up to?
Not much. Just sort of hanging. I guess. Kind of bored. You want to watch TV or something?
Yeah, fuck it. There's always something good on TV.
Good evening, Seattle. Thank you for joining us for this special KOMO presentation. I'm Eric Johnson, and I'm fighting for the soul of my family. This is Christmas, and instead of holding your tiny bodies in my arms next to the warm glow of a crackling fire, I'm once again haunted by the memory of your faces, fading into obscurity in the dark void of my aging mind. Haunted, I can feel you still, roaming the halls and rooms of my empty life eternally, ever out of reach, just beyond my grasp. You must be so old now, children. Your mother? Is she well? Please, if I might just hear your voices again, I would give anything, my very soul, if you would breathe life into these weary old bones. Please, kids. Now, if you are hearing my voice, this message is for you. Please let me see you for Christmas. The holidays are a time for family to be together. If you could return a phone call, respond to a Facebook post, or like one of my TikToks, you would be making Christmas merrier for your dear father.
Welcome back to Seattle Sucks, a podcast about hating the city that we love. It's me, Colin. I'm here with Greg and Brian, and we have a guest.
We do.
Hi.
We have... Hey, Cassidy. We've got our friend Cassidy, a.k.a. Corn. How you doing?
Hi, aka Lucy Apple Juicy.
Yeah. Cassidy is an ex-podcaster and TikTok thinkfluencer.
What does that mean?
So modest. Seattle Sucks Washington politics correspondent, Snore, a filthy electoralist organizer, field director, and campaign manager, former shop steward at UFCW Local 40, and a founding member, organizer, and endorser of the Washington Campaign Workers Collective.
Hey guys, what up?
Hey.
Welcome back to the show, Cassidy.
Well, and most
Thank you for
importantly,
having me.
Yeah, most importantly, Cassie's a repeat guest, a
I
beloved
am.
repeat guest.
Yes.
And if you want to hear some of her previous talk to learn like whether or not her nickname Korn comes from her love of the band Korn, you'll just have to listen to the previous episode. We don't have time to get into it, so we can't
Not
get into
today.
whether it is or not. Not today.
Not
Yeah,
today.
I mean, you can make a guess. Like, we probably wouldn't bring it up ever if that wasn't the reason, but we'll leave that up to your,
Yeah,
your
you'll just have
guess.
to go back listen to the
You'll
old
just have to
episode.
listen. So obviously, we're assuming that she really likes Korn, the band. Okay. So much to talk about. Cassidy, you have worked on a lot of campaigns.
Yeah.
I crashed on your hot couch in Iowa on the Birdie campaign.
Yes, you did.
You've worked on a lot of other stuff here. And now you've been trying to tell me, if I get a lot of texts from you, I mostly ignore them, but
So rude.
like sometimes you text me at 1 a.m. and then get offended when I inform you that that's an inappropriate time to just text someone about some political campaign worker bullshit
Okay,
that I
well,
only
here's the
barely
thing.
care about.
Like, you fed me in Iowa when I was hungry and scared and cold. And
I thought you were Come and Go was feeding you in Iowa.
yeah, no, but like the only homemade meal I had was from you. And like, I'm not even joking. Like, you are the only one who cooked for me. And you saved my life. Remember, you saved my life when I fell down a flight of stairs on the 4th of July. Maybe or maybe not from drinking a little too much. I don't know. But my point being is that like, I thought I could count on you. I thought that I could text you at 1 a.m. I thought you were my homie. But
Yeah, this is what happened. Like you save someone's life and then they think like you own their soul for eternity and are now
Yeah.
responsible for them, or they try to like, be your servant in this life and the next. And honestly, it's mostly a drag.
Yeah, you save somebody's life, you have this formative experience with them in Iowa, and they just, from that, get some sort of license to think that you formed a relationship, like
Yeah.
a human relationship.
Like I would
that
want
they can
another
count on.
fucking friend. Oh my God.
So rude.
Anyway.
No, but seriously, like when we were in Iowa, because you were staying with us, you got to see a lot of the union organizing that we were doing.
The Wildcat labor hell raising, shit starting. This is all stuff we want to talk about. But first, tell us like a bit about what Washington Campaign Workers Collective is. What the fuck?
Yeah,
you've been trying to tell me for weeks. I still don't get it. Go on.
I hate you. So, I've been super open on social media, like privately with friends and stuff like that about, like working on campaigns fucking sucks a lot of the time. No matter who your boss is, no matter how progressive they may be, like more often than not, campaign workers who are like the people who are like running these campaigns, like they get fucked over, they don't get health care, they have insane hours. And so just like with the pandemic going on and everything, all of us are on Zoom. And so a lot of us campaign workers here in Washington State, like we are either unemployed or we're working from home. And so we started doing Zoom meetings together where we just started like talking about all the fucked up shit that we have to go through. And so, because we're organizers, those organic Zoom meetings turned into organizing. And so we formed the Washington Campaign Workers Collective.
Very cool.
Any questions? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we have tons of questions about that.
Yeah.
And I want to get into talking about all your shit starting that jeopardized and eventually, destroyed the Bernie campaign.
I took down Bernie Sanders. Yeah.
In Iowa. Yeah. I just remember, being in that house and it being like this meeting place for all of the thing is like when you ask all the commies in the country to like come to some like flyover state to
dead ass place.
To get a supposed some kind of socialist old man elected president, like you're going to have labor problems. Like they're not going to take any shit, no matter how committed they are to your cause. They are not going to take any shit from you, which I just found to be so predictable and funny and cool to see you guys like doing like wildcat organizing to like drafting emails to management being like, we will do like a symbolic work stoppage if you fuck with us. And that's all cool stuff we want to talk about.
He was getting a lot of emails from us
from this little sorority looking house in Iowa.
Like we had that big ass house and we would just have people from all over the state would come and stay with us, come do organizing because like we were the central location. And so even after the Bernie campaign, like a lot of us, we wanted to make sure that even after the Bernie campaign, after whatever campaigns we're working on this cycle, like we need to be better. Bernie's campaign was one of the first to unionize, but that doesn't necessarily mean like it was good or that like our CBA was any good. And so like we've learned a lot from that. And so that's what we're bringing to the Washington Campaign Workers Collective. So we the first thing we did is we put together like a bill of rights for campaign workers because like there's so many things that need to be addressed. But again, like in this pandemic, like we have been fucked over really bad, whether it be that like, we're working from home and we're having to, pay for our laptops and our cell phones and no one's paying for that. Or, we're not getting transitional pay. And then, sometimes we qualify for unemployment, sometimes we don't, and so things like that, things like not having healthcare in a pandemic. That's huge. And a lot of the time it's coming from candidates who, they claim to be pro-union, pro-labor. They claim to want to make healthcare better. But when it comes to their staff, they don't actually do it. So we have a lot of super exciting stuff that we're going to be announcing in the next week or two. So I think I'm going to come back on and talk about that more. But what do you guys think?
Yeah, well, so, I mean, I think that's, since evidently, as of this weekend, a bunch of stuff is going down that you won't let us talk about.
It's kind of hush-hush. Yeah.
I guess we're basically embargoed and we might as well wait to talk about the rest of it. So I guess that kind of leaves us without anything to do, yeah?
Yeah, well, I'm sorry.
Could it be that Korn's lead singer, Jonathan Davies, is taking a lead role in all of this? Tune in next week to find out.
You'll see.
Yeah, well, there's not really much to do. You're right, Greg, and it's kind of weird for you to invite your friend over for an episode and just call it quits like 10 minutes in.
I guess that's it.
Listen, this is my process.
Yeah,
and it's worked so far, Brian. Okay.
I guess so. So if that's it, do you guys just want to watch some TV?
Yeah. Put it on.
Sure.
All right, great.
I'm going to say some hard things about this place, not because I don't like Seattle, but because I love it. And I'm going to start by saying this. Seattle no longer feels the need to stop anyone from doing anything for any reason at any time. The most stunning city in America is dying, all right. Businesses and citizens have been largely abandoned, left to fend for themselves in favor of a self-congratulatory compassion, a phony grace. If you shout long enough, Seattle will give you what you want. We'll abandon a police precinct, an entire chunk of the city, and all the people that live and work there. All of it is yours for the taking if you shout long enough. If you want to live somewhere, anywhere, and if you want to pile up garbage and waste and filth, you can do that too. Parks, street corners, neighborhood nooks and crannies, have at it. You think Seattle's going to stop you? We'll even do away with the navigation team, just to make sure. Feeling artistic? You're in luck. Seattle is your canvas. Have at it. Express yourself. Nobody's going to stop you from leaving temporary scars on the psyche of a damaged city. They're too busy reimagining. If you want to keep using the drugs that are killing you, we'll help out. We'll give you needles. We'll order the cops not to make arrests. We'll legalize hard narcotics on our streets. We will stand by and watch as you kill yourself, because Seattle no longer feels the need to stop anyone from doing anything for any reason. And if you want to go out into the communities and businesses, stealing all day long to get the drugs that are killing you, we won't stop you or rehabilitate you or intervene in any meaningful way. And when the citizens demand protection and the businesses say who's looking out for us, we'll shut down the county jail and the juvenile detention center because we're so forward thinking. We'll run the chief of police out of town and hope that bad people stop doing bad things because we're so very good. We'll stop prosecuting criminal behavior. Heck, we won't even file charges so it doesn't show up in the crime stats. We'll handcuff the police and beat down the judges who step out of line. If you want to intimidate the leaders who voice objections, who's going to stop you? Seattle? Come on. We'll doggedly plow ahead with a reckless experiment that is systematically ruining what used to be the best place to live in America. And that, all of it, is at the very heart of the fight for the soul of Seattle. The fact that we no longer feel the need to stop anyone from doing anything for any reason at any time.
Yeah,
That's right, folks. It's that time of year. Ring those jingle bells. It's time for another installment from KOMO News' own Lenny Riefenstahl for our times. Eric Johnson. You know, if you guys recall, Seattle is Dying was one of our, I think, most popular early episodes. Wouldn't you say, Colin?
That's true. Yes.
When was
why not?
that?
Seattle is Dying would have come
Summer
out.
2018.
That's
Yeah,
wild.
I think so.
Yeah. So why not go back to the well?
Yeah.
I mean, Eric Johnson is.
Yeah, seriously. If you recall in that episode, Colin and I just like sat and watched the whole thing clip by clip and put out a 2-hour episode of us reacting to the entire fucking thing.
So we're gonna do that again.
No, thank you. So brave servants, public servants that we are, Brian and I just watched this piece of shit in its entirety, mere an hour ago, and
Colin and I did not.
Yeah.
which is perfect because we've done the work for you. Our listeners have to do even less work, but now you're going to get to hear some clips of it that are key, so that we can kind of decode without all the fluff. We can get down to like the real theses of this thing.
Yeah, can you like bring the next door posts down from the mountain or the server room? See them?
I mean, no, you shouldn't watch this. No one should watch this. It's mostly, it was basically very boring for the most part. It's also a lot of rehashed shit from Seattle is Dying a year and a half ago and from the last, year of the local press, in particular KOMO's coverage of the uprisings. And, it has a very predictable take on everything. Johnson does try to form a basic thesis, but as we'll see, it's really basically we need to warehouse people in prison, and he'll go to lengths to say, no, that's not what it is. But that's ultimately what he says. So in that opening, we just heard him talking about how fucking, disgusting Seattle has become, how we're losing this soul. It's more of the same language he used before. But what's he really saying? Like, it's all stuff we talked about before. We've talked about so many times. This is why it's ultimately so boring. It's just like, look, the poor and addicted are very visible right now, and we think that's the end of the world, and we're not really willing to engage on a serious level with any of the possible causes of that, except like that themselves. Like, really, they say many times it starts with the drugs, and they don't really explore that any farther.
Greg, you're forgetting to explore it with a Venn diagram
in which it does not start with the drugs.
Where one circle says drugs, one circle says crime, and the other circle says homelessness. And like,
there's not a lot of overlap.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, so one of the things he says, not once, not twice, but thrice in his opening statement we just heard, and I kind of want to get y'all's takes on it, which is, this is his sort of thesis that clearly is going to be, or not thesis, but clearly it's going to be the motto that we're going to have to hear for the next year, which is Seattle no longer feels the need to stop anyone from doing anything at any time. And I was just curious, what are you guys doing with your newfound freedom?
I mean, obviously that's like the most fucking backwards take on what this could be, because I mean, look at how fucking horrible the police have been treating all of us who have been out on the streets. Like, to say that we can do whatever we want, I mean, I wish we could. I wish that was the case. That would have been fucking rad.
Yeah, no kidding, right? Well, and it was kind of funny because it came out the exact same weekend that the Stranger had this big article about how the public defenders in Seattle are like begging, city prosecutors and county prosecutors to stop bringing people in and charging them on like minor offenses because COVID-19 is like running rampant in the King County jail.
Exactly. And I mean, one of the demands of protesters has been to release all protesters, drop all charges. I mean, if we were able to just do whatever the fuck we wanted, then there wouldn't be protesters with charges and protesters being jailed.
Yeah. And one of their big themes, of course, is that this was, of course, not always the case in Seattle, that you could just do whatever you wanted without going to jail. I mean, contrary to apparently what anybody in the Seattle legal system says. but this was always the case, that it used to be the perfect place to live in America. And I just always think that's funny because I'm not a native Seattleite, and Greg keeps trying to justify this claim that KOMO makes over and over again that Seattle was the best place in America, because
you're always twisting my words.
Having not grown up here, having been a late resident to Seattle, my image of Seattle was always as the home of grunge music. And why is everybody so sad there? Because man, that place must fucking suck.
Part of Seattle's sort of conception of itself for a long time is like, everyone's like, ooh, this is the secret we don't want anyone else to know about, and it's so perfect here. Of course, there's a lot of bullshit wrapped up in that, and none of it really makes sense, and it's only a certain class of people, white middle class people, that this was ever like this dream place to live. And of course, like, we'll go into like all the other things that are fucked up. People's idea of like how crime has changed or how poverty has changed over the course of time in the city is very strange. But it's not like, it's not like Seattle ever thought of itself until more recently as like aspiring to be a, quote, world-class city,
No.
I did notice he basically stole our tagline.
Good call, dude.
Yeah, we gotta get our lawyer on that.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the first guys they interview, and I just want to mention some quotes from this guy because I thought they're very interesting. And he's, obviously the documentary is not edited in real time, right? So this is a choice to make him right up front, right after this intro piece. And it's this old guy who owns a bike store. And, he talks about how he moved to Seattle in 1983. It was the perfect place to live. He lets us know that the police have personally told him that, they've been told that under their policies, they are not allowed to stop crime anymore. And in fact, will be killed by communist revolutionaries if they stop any crime. which again is, one of these themes you hear a lot. But he at one point says that downtown Seattle is now Tombstone, Arizona. He doesn't give a year for that, though. So maybe he means like Tombstone, Arizona today. I don't know. But he then follows it up by saying Seattle's committing civilizational suicide. And he's like very like big on this. And I do kind of wonder, like, that language sounds a little familiar. And I'm just kind of curious y'all's sort of take on this old man and kind of putting him up front in this.
I mean, I don't know. It's not surprising that they have an old business owner speaking for the city of Seattle. We love to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, this is like normally like their hosts or their hosts. This is normally like the guests they get on this. It's just like downtown business person complaining to you, right? Or downtown Seattle Association rep,
Well, and it highlights like what we already know, obviously, but just like the cops are like having whisper campaigns with businesses to like put weird shit in their fucking ear holes, and like it spreads and it works.
Yeah, and it like convinces people that they're on some sort of weird strike or something.
Right.
What is interesting, because the video, they show some security footage, over the top of this guy making these comments. And it's of somebody breaking the window of his bicycle shop and riding off with a Schwinn or whatever. And, one way the cops could approach that is they could tell him the truth, like Big Lebowski style, and just laugh in his face and be like, oh, yeah, we'll find it. We got it. We're working in shifts on it. Right. And tell the truth, which is that, yeah, we're not really going to look. And it's because this is like small crime. And also we're never going to find it. Sorry. But yeah, I mean, the police have been engaging now for years. And as you said, Cassie, a whisper campaign to essentially stoke fear in the community and justify their own existence in the face of, the consent decree, in the face of increased criticism locally and nationally. And
right.
I want to
I was just going to say, like you said, it allows them to kind of like justify not only their laziness, but just ineffectiveness, while also maintaining those connections and ties to business owners by being like, oh, like I'm giving you the inside scoop. This is how it really is, blah, blah, blah. They're able to like further those ties and those connections while not doing anything and not doing their job. It's tight.
And those of us that have like the particular brain bug that means that we are occasionally checking in on the Safe Seattle Facebook page know that it's largely been the police stoking the Safe Seattle stuff too, and telling them that, actually, Shava Sawat, who runs our entire government, personally told us we're not allowed to do anything about homelessness or whatever. That they are essentially creating they're operating as a political actor. Hard to believe, this organization,
right? And I mean, it's not even just I mean, I'm not saying it's okay, but it'd be one thing if it was it's a whisper campaign amongst business owners, police, whatever. But like we have seen time and time again that these whisper campaigns and the bullshit that they push, like not only do they get put on programs like this, but like the whole they're checking IDs thing, like that was reported as if it was fact, when in reality it was just a bullshit whisper campaign.
Yeah. And I kind of want to go to this other comment he made right after the Tombstone, Arizona comment, that Seattle's committing civilizational suicide. And at least to my ear, and I'm curious if it struck other people's ears the same way, is it seemed to be a thorough internalizing of the like race suicide talk of the last 4 years. I mean, you had Trump in the race suicide tweet, you had the Jews will not replace us chants, all this kind of stuff.
It's Nazi shit.
And it is worth noting that watching this documentary, the black population of Seattle black people make up 7% of the population of Seattle. They're approximately 70% of the people featured in this video, like as the enemies, right? Whenever there's a homeless person, they're black. Whenever there's a crime they caught on video, they make sure that it's a black person committing the crime, right? So I mean, there's a vibe, I guess is what I'm saying, watching this. An unmistakable
vibes.
Going back to what you said, Brian, about him moving, I did watch maybe the first 10 minutes of the film, so I saw.
Oh my God, you lied.
Well, I didn't exactly lie. But,
I feel so unincluded.
I only saw up to this, so trust me. The rest of this, I'm going in blind, or I am going in without any knowledge. But it's interesting that my recollection is that he moved in 82, but either 82 or 83. That's the year that Streetwise was filmed. So it's really odd that this guy is painting Seattle as this wonderful utopian enclave that had no problems at all. Like this was literally around the time that Gary Ridgway was out having a ball. There's in that movie follows all kinds of kids just on the street in Pioneer Square. So whatever version of Seattle that he's romanticizing probably never actually existed.
Well, you know what? It probably did exist for him.
Yeah. Maybe.
No, listen, the Seattle was in the, in a long-term, very serious, very famous, and still sometimes actually remembered when it's referenced as like possibly happening again because of Shauna Swan recession. Okay? Like a major industrial recession with thousands of layoffs at Boeing. So this guy probably, was able to come out here from wherever he came from, buy a house cheap, like incredibly cheap. Like it was a place at that time, like there are now, where you're like, oh wow, I could go to Nebraska and buy a 500,000 square foot house for $50,000 or something, right? And that's like what it was like out here, except it's not like a shithole like Nebraska, right? This is the myth of Seattle, right? Because there was one time when you could come out here and buy a house in the city, not even out in the middle of nowhere, and it was this pretty place. There were trees, but that's if you were middle class, white, maybe not super rich, but you built this myth around you that this was this magical place to live. And now this guy has had a thriving business here for decades. His house he bought, or however many times he's traded up, have probably exploded in fucking value over the course of his time here, making him from like lower middle class able to do that. Yeah. From starting out at a place where he could move across the country and buy a house probably and start a business to being, through no fault of his own, astronomically rich, just because of inflated home value over the last 40 years. And all the while, there have always been poor people in Seattle. There has always been drug addiction, just like the whole fucking country. Okay. Mm-hmm. There's never been a time. So there was always a black population in Seattle that was the most poor, had the most like just getting the shit end of the funnel for all of our social problems. And there was always a larger poor population, just like you said, in Pioneer Square. There was even homelessness throughout all this time, though that has exploded due to the same fucking housing price increases that have made this whiny asshole fucking unbelievably wealthy.
Right. It's like maybe things weren't so bad for him during that time because, like, I don't know, he had access to housing. Maybe, I don't know, that would help people, help Seattle be less terrible. I don't know. Weird.
Well, he was economically secure, right? So that's what he's mistaking that for some glorious era as opposed to just the difference between him and other people, right?
Right. And he was isolated from it to a certain degree. He didn't,
you didn't see it.
Own home neighborhood and the neighborhood his business was in and his commute. He didn't see the level of poverty. He didn't have to interact with it. There was poverty. There was not as much homelessness, though there was homelessness. We have had an explosion of homelessness, but there was drug addiction. People were doing it in their homes.
Yeah,
exactly.
And it was affecting the poor population the most. There were like these are all things that have existed, and now this comes back to what. From Seattle is dying to what the fuck we've been shouting about this entire time we've done the show for 3 years or whatever. They just don't want to see it. It's literally having it in view that drives all of this.
Yeah. And I mean, interestingly, KOMO is going to portray all this stuff as if it were new. Yeah. As if the urban poverty is some new thing. One, that only happens in Seattle, and two, is brand new. And, despite the fact that the term Skid Road comes from Seattle, but they also are going to depict the drug issue as a new issue and something totally new, or something totally located in Seattle. But again, as a kid who grew up outside the city, I knew two things about Seattle in the early 90s, which was it's where grunge came from and heroin. Yeah, but we'll leave the fantasies aside. Let's go back to the early 90s. Let's take a trip back to 1993. So this is going to be a speech they play from City Prosecutor Mark Sidron from 1993. And then they have Old Man Sidron on himself. He does a little follow-up. I can't remember if it's in the clip or not. But let's go ahead and take a listen.
We are pretty much like those other big American cities. Back east, as we used to say when I was a kid. I think that's one reason why the increasing disorder on our streets touches a nerve for so many. If the past is prologue, we have seen one version of the future in city after city. A dying retail core where there is more criminal than commercial activity, where the simplest rules of civility are ignored without consequence, where random, senseless acts of violence become pervasive, culminating in the migration of those who can leave. This is not Seattle today, but this downward spiral doesn't happen overnight, and it will be more than just a bad dream if we don't wake up to the challenges we confront and act.
The bad dream is here. Mark Sidran sees it. We all see it. The question is how and why, and what are we going to do about it?
So an interesting thing he talks about here is that they're looking across the country and seeing, this was an obsession in American politics, the decay of urban interiors and rising crime in the 70s and 80s. And he's remarking there in 1992, like, well, gosh, aren't we lucky we haven't suffered the same fate as, parts of Manhattan, as Detroit, etc., basically. But like, warning, this, basically he's a tough on crime Democrat prosecutor. Warning, that could be here. That could happen here. If we're not careful, if we don't take action now. And what's interesting is, like, again, he gets this wrong. Like we were just talking about, there was crime and there was poverty. There always has been in this city. What is interesting is it's just not as visible, right? This is this myth. They think of this as this perfect place without that. This isn't. I mean, my parents are both refugees from eastern shitholes, like, Rust Belt, decaying places, who like came out here and were like, wow, this place isn't like that. There's a lot of reasons for that, even though, again, like, there was an major industrial recession here in the late 70s that lasted a long time. But there's another thing that is important to keep in mind when talking about the way Seattle has developed differently from, say, eastern cities that people here compare it to. And that's that it being the Northwest was one of the most successfully, pristinely, rigorously segregated cities in America. Mm-hmm. So this city was ruthlessly redlined in a way that most places never were, to a degree. And, it's called the Central District, but the Red Line District is east of the downtown core of the city. So it was effectively, from the beginning, cloistered off in a place where you didn't have to go. That's not the way it was in lots of other places. So when white flight started, decimating urban neighborhoods and urban tax bases, like, it didn't happen the same way in Seattle. So, I mean, that's like key. Again, race comes very much to the center of this. This is just historically one of the most, like, ruthlessly racist places there is,
No, I was just going to say, like, yeah, maybe that dude was like, oh, it's coming in the 90s. But yeah, it's just like we were just so redlined that bro didn't know what was happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's the irony of his statement, right? Is that Seattle was one of the early adopters of it, and one of the prime examples of the sort of actual modern trend in city development, which is the money is all moving back to the urban core and the poverty is being pushed out into the exurbs, right? And Seattle is a perfect example of this. Our downtown area is some of the most expensive real estate in the country. I think it's the third most expensive real estate in the country. So it's one, I mean, it's hilarious to play that and be like, it's totally come true, when it very clearly hasn't. I mean, we have people paying $2,500 a month to live in a 40 square foot apartment. So I think it leads to this kind of thing that me and Greg talked about the entire time as we were watching this documentary, which is, who is this documentary for?
Yeah.
Like, who is the audience? I feel like a teacher now. I'm asking questions instead of answering.
Well, it's clearly, I mean, as
you
were
gonna
saying
start
as we
calling
watched
on
it,
people?
Brian, it's not, it's for no one who actually lives in this city.
It's for people in Bothell.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, like in Bellevue and like all the suburbs that still have, like all the places that still have like some money in it, right?
Yeah, it's for people in fucking Everett.
Yeah, and I mean, it's one of those funny things. I mean, it's funny to say it's for people in Everett because in a way it is for them too. But, you know, anybody in Everett who had ever, I mean, this is for people who never go to Seattle.
Right.
Because if you lived in Everett and came to Seattle with any sort of regular consistency, you'd realize like, holy shit, our town's like way fucking poor, like way, you know, whatever. But it is a fantasy being sold to all these people who don't fucking live here, right? Sold to a national audience, a suburban audience, etc. And it just always reminded me of, I would have these, when I worked up in Snohomish, I'd have these guys at the shop that I worked at who would tell me about how they never go to Seattle, like without their gun or whatever. And I'd always be like, why? God. And they'd just be like, and they would tell me about like how there's like poor people everywhere, which just be serious. Poor means code for black or whatever. But it was always one of those funny things of like, they imagined Seattle as like Detroit in the 1980s, or more accurately, Detroit in a RoboCop film, as opposed to, again, one of the wealth. It's like Seattle is full of crime, depravity, and inhumanity. It's just not the kind you're thinking of. It's you know, Bezos built, like the Gates Foundation's in downtown Seattle, so it's definitely full of crime and depravity, but not what you're imagining, not what you can handle with a gun.
Yeah, they're mapping what they're seeing onto a now totally outdated like understanding of poverty and wealth in America that was never really true.
Yeah.
Because there was a time when, you know, we saw industry grow in places and make it wealthy, and then capital flight basically pull it out and destroy those places. And that what has made people poor. And that's not how it works now as much. So we're in this economy, we have very, very rich people and we have poor people. And there's a lot of very, very rich people and wealth concentrated in Seattle. And you can have that and have it be this incredibly wealthy place for most people and still have an underclass of disposable excess population who live on the streets. And that's incongruous in people's minds. Like, they don't really have a model for that if you're just, you know, Joe Schmuck from Everett or something.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's also one of those things that comes from never having interacted with the city in any real or serious way. And so to kind of get at this, they go and it's very funny. They have an interview segment that they come back to later in the film too, with this guy from San Francisco. And they keep saying, they say one time they're in San Francisco and they just keep saying in the Tenderloin after that. And I think it'd be funny to like poll viewers of this documentary and ask them like, you know, whereabouts on a map of Seattle is the Tenderloin, and see if they would try
like jaywalking segment. Of like
they do their best to try and pretend like this is in Seattle, because I guess we're having a hard time finding interview subjects like this man, which I'll get to why here in a second. Which he is a guy who claims, I'm going to say claims because I think that literally 80% of anything anybody says on this is just an outright lie. But he claims that he had fallen into drug addiction, had become homeless, and you know, he tells the story about how he's seen people get hacked up with machetes on the mean streets. Oh my God. And that, you know, that homelessness is a virus, and that if it wasn't for one cop who continued to arrest me over and over again, I'd be dead by now. So again, this is this narrative. They're going to trot out exactly two people, because I think that's all they can find, who are going to claim that the police saved them by basically harassing and arresting and jailing them constantly. That they were able to be saved. But it is this image that they're trying to portray, right? Of if you go to downtown Seattle, I mean, you could get hacked up with a machete. It's a fact.
It's a fact. Yep. No, when in reality, like anyone who has lived in the city and who has also lived in like rural Washington state, like I am far more afraid of getting hacked up with a machete in Port Angeles than I have ever been in Seattle, ever.
Well, they keep talking about, so at one point in this sort of in the same area, it's interesting they bring this up because they keep bringing up the thing about murder rates, and they say that, you know, the last year's murder rate, by last year, I mean 2018, which is the last finalized one. But anyways, last year's murder rate was the highest it's been in 5 years. And it was kind of funny because me and Greg were sort of laughing at that. And I was like, well, you know, what does that mean, right? And so I ended up looking it up, and I was like, that's one way you could say that. Another way you could say it is last year's murder rate was half the murder rate in Seattle in 1999. Still another way is you could say it's half the murder rate of Tacoma. Still another rate is you could say it was way down the fucking list just for areas in Washington and is well below any sort of urban average in the country.
In the country, yeah.
Another way you could say it is Seattle's actually an incredibly safe city, relatively.
Safe for America.
For America.
Always has been.
Maybe not for a civilized country, but for this one, it's incredibly safe.
For as shitty a country as, look, again, the myth of Seattle, there's truth to it. You know, like, that again, this all just comes down to like, yes, people know this. People have understood this. They're like, oh, you can come out here and it's not, yes, this is still America. I didn't have to move to Canada, but we don't have the same degree of social malady that I see other places. And what is bothering people is, oh no, I'm seeing visible evidence that bad things are happening. The truth is, yes, this is a shitty country. This entire economy is an engine for creating poor, desperate, homeless, addicted people. But at the same time, the scare tactics here being used are totally fraudulent and dishonest, because this is, with everything that is happening here, all the poverty, this is that does not correlate to danger, because this is still one of the safest fucking places you could possibly live in America. Yeah. The farther out of Seattle you get in Washington State, the higher the crime rate is.
Yeah, and I mean, the irony, of course, being for Mark Sidron's complaining in 1993 about the fact that, we're going to have urban warfare. And, I'm sure, he was 1 year away from a super predator's speech or whatever. The reality is this crime in Seattle was already declining when he made that speech. It has been, like in every city in America, has been on the decline since the early to mid 90s.
No, and I mean, just like I was just going to say, I mean, just like the saying, like, ignorance is bliss. And I think that like privilege is ignorance. And so a lot of white Seattleites, like, they have been able to live comfortably. And even if all this shit is going on, like, they don't have to see it. And so that ignorance is bliss. And that, like, I think that really reminds me of just like what's going on right now on the bigger scale with like Trump and Biden. Is it's like what fucking sucked about, or what was kind of good about Trump was like white people had to fucking pay attention to what was going on. And now all of a sudden, like, people are so stoked, like, because Biden's coming in. But the reality is they're just going to go back to the ignorance is bliss sort of mentality. And like black and brown people are going to continue to suffer.
Oh, they're so excited to go back to brunch. Yeah. You can't.
And so that's what people in Seattle want. Like, I feel like that's
what they're mad about. They're like,
sort of people. Yeah.
I can't enjoy brunch if there's poor people over here. Where the fuck is my ignorance? I was blissful.
Yeah.
Please give me back my fucking ignorance. I want to maybe hear some poverty statistics once in a while. I don't want to have to fucking see it.
Right.
But it was, and I do think it's such an important point that you bring up there, Cassie, because I during the entire 4 years of Trump, as far as I could tell from people that would just be like shouting at me, whenever I try and explain that like ICE was imprisoning children, or like, the immigration was imprisoning children, have been for decades, right? Whenever you try to explain this stuff, people get furious at me. And the more I kind of like try and peel away at what they're mad at, what it really came down to is they're mad that they had to know about it. Exactly. Like they're mad that they couldn't turn it off, that was being shown to them on the news or whatever. And it made them furious. And
they couldn't look away. Yeah.
Exactly. And to your point, I mean, if Seattle was this dangerous city, you wouldn't have to have the graphic images of violence and stuff that this documentary sort of wallows in, because people would know what you're talking about. But of course, they don't from any sort of personal experience. So you have to show it to them. Yeah. And that brings me to the scene that I want to kind of describe to you guys and get your sort of take on it, which is there is a scene that can only be described as the knockout game scene of the film.
Yeah.
And it's taken from a security cam, I think, on the side of the courthouse. And everything in it, I mean, Eric Johnson came so hard when he found this footage. But
oh my God, yeah.
There is a young, skinny, blonde white woman standing at the corner.
No.
Bleach blonde, clear as day. And then a, male in probably his 20s or 30s, right? Who he's black, but it's a little hard to tell in the security footage. So don't worry. They give you a very clear mug shot later just to drive home. Basically walks up and punches her in the head, right? And then walks off. And they really like show it multiple times. They like really linger on this and really talk, like there's a whole basically like 10-minute segment on this. And, like literally after they show it, Eric Johnson goes, perhaps you'll find this symbolic, right? Showing the video. But on the one hand, it's obviously horrifyingly racist, right? And it's just, engaging in the sort of worse racist fear mongering. Although, yeah, I mean, real like early 19th century racist fear mongering. But on the other hand, why would you show that to anybody, or feel you have to show this if, you know, people actually are feeling in their heart that it's this scary place from any sort of personal experience, right? Like, you're teaching us something by showing us this. This is
no, it's like, see, look, see, guys, yeah, no,
yeah. I mean, it's truly astonishing. I was every once in a while, you know, because this is our third, you know, dip into the KOMO homelessness series. And you feel like you've seen it all, but every once in a while they come out and surprise you. The knockout game video was a little shocking. They must have really searched for that, because I can't believe that wasn't on like federal. I can't believe that wasn't on national news broadcasts. But yeah, I mean,
should have gifted it. Sorry,
yeah. It's gonna be a gift by the time this is over. I'm sure. I've not checked any of the usual like Facebook hives to see how they've interpreted this yet, but I mean, I can't imagine that this scene isn't going. I mean, the one plus, it's like 45 minutes into the movie, so you'd have to have watched that much of it to see it. But I am kind of curious.
There were definitely a lot of drop-offs by then. Yeah.
Oh God, yeah. Like, there's no way that, you know,
it's the big midpoint. You know, it's like you hook them in for the rest with that.
Right. Yeah.
Well, this one's for all the podcasters watching.
Exactly. Yeah. For the podcasters and Rich Smith.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what they do. They just give like one anecdote and they're like, that's Seattle.
Mm-hmm. And as much as I don't want to excuse this woman getting punched in the head or say that it's okay or anything, it's also a city of 700,000 people that is the like centerpiece of a region of like 3 million people.
Yeah, and, like wild shit happens everywhere. Like, you don't think that people are getting punched in the head in fucking downtown Squim? Like, it's happening.
Yeah. People getting punched in the head. As somebody who's been punched in the head, let me tell you, people get punched in the head.
Yes, they do.
This is different because that woman was minding her own business and didn't deserve it.
That's true. Well, you know,
not just. I mean, yeah, whatever.
I mean, here's the thing: the Eric Johnson uses this in two ways. It's part of a narrative about how, you know, certain parts of the city have been abandoned by the police department, so that they just won't, you know, keep people safe on 4th in front of the courthouse at the main entrance. And the other thing is, you know, a lot of this does take a turn toward talking about mental health. And the man in the video who allegedly punched this woman is claimed to have mental health issues. And, you know, you can believe that.
Right.
And Johnson, you know, spends a lot of time talking about how we don't do enough for people with mental health issues in this. And there is, you know, this is a point we can agree with him on, right? But like, we come to find that it's all used in this way to, he ultimately uses it to make it sound like his whole program is ultimately compassionate, but it's ultimately all leading to warehouse people in jail. So,
well, and okay, like, let's say, sure, like, we agree, like, we need to do more for people who have mental health issues and stuff like that. Is blasting this guy on fucking local news station a way to help this person who's obviously dealing with a mental health crisis? Like, that's not helpful.
Yeah, but also,
like, you know, you don't get to have it both ways.
In all the ways that, you know, Eric Johnson is ready to talk about how we need to do more for people's mental health, key things like housing do not come up in his program, his suggestions for how we do this.
Shocking.
In fact, he scoffs at the very idea. So, like, you know, so it's totally disingenuous.
Yeah, at the end, he even makes a point of pointing out that housing actually would not help the situation. But it's interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's very funny because in different hands, this story and a lot of this stuff that he shows could be an argument for like, wow, we really need a free at the point of service universal healthcare system that includes things like mental health treatment and stuff like that. Like
and drug treatment.
Yeah, like that is a really big problem. You're right, Eric. I do think we should have a more compassionate healthcare system paid for by the likes of Amazon. Of course, that's not his point. But the other part of it, too, is that he tells the story of the guy who had punched a woman. And he had been in and out of jail. I think they said he had been like arrested and been in jail like 30 times since his childhood. He had, you know, had like drug issues. He had these mental health issues. He says that that he was hearing voices that told him to punch a woman or whatever. And again, in different hands, you could say, wow, this really shows the brutality of the American criminal justice system that takes somebody that either had or didn't or gave them mental health issues, and it sort of brutalizes them on and off, harassing them constantly, putting them in cages, treating them like animals. And look at what that creates. Like, look at the problems that leads to, right? So it's kind of funny, like, in just different hands, you could point to this exact same thing and be like, wow, what a fucking horrifying, brutal system we have.
But this is the key. Failed. One of the key lies of this whole thing, right? That this is a major, like, conservative way of thinking about this stuff. His whole vision of this is that, actually, right now, our criminal justice system over the last, 10 years, because we're, liberal, compassionate, naively compassionate Seattle has been getting so lax, and we've just been letting everything slide, and that's what's caused this problem. Never mind the fact that, like, Shama Sawant and, the real radicals have only been in power for, like, less than a year, but and Shama Sawant's only been around for a while, like, and is one person. He really conflates, like, because a lot of this ends up being about, like, the council's, defund efforts, etc., which of course are, like, contemporaneous with this documentary and have not taken any effect. But he's sort of conflating that with, like, the general attitude over, because we're Seattle and we think of ourselves as lib and compassionate, like, that's led to this devolution of law and order over the last decade that has led, obviously, to this explosion of drug use and homelessness. And of course, none of that fucking tracks, because what we actually know is that, like, we are continually imprisoning more and more people. Our police budgets have gone continually up and up here and just like everywhere else in America. And this whole thing is about just denying that any of our problems have any economic or systemic causes. It's about our liberal, compassionate attitude and permissiveness that has caused all these problems.
Yeah, who's in charge? Like, Mayor Jenny.
And these things, but you're talking, like, piecemeal things that have sort of relaxed in recent years that are sort of absurd to claim as the cause of our, alarming catastrophe of homelessness.
Well, and it does imply, to the Mayor Jenny point, I think the only time she even comes up in the whole thing is to imply that she was, like, Grand Marshal of the CHOP.
Yeah.
And,
they probably had to cut all her parts out after her announcement. So,
well, basically, the only time she does come in is to say the Summer of Love quote on CNN. And so it's basically like, yeah, our mayor who was, we can blame for the CHOP because she was so into it.
Yeah. So, again, it's for an audience that has very little interaction with the city itself. And so, to the point that Greg was making, there is an interesting segment at about the hour marker where they start talking about the Elephant Car Wash, and then they start pointing to other businesses downtown and, like, look at all these retail businesses downtown that are going out of business. And the funny thing is, they hilariously just say offhand, sure, COVID's played a part, but how does that explain why all these businesses are going out of business? And the implication is that the reason why downtown retail is struggling is purely because of homelessness in the area.
Which is, we've heard, this has been a talking point the last 2 years.
Yeah. And it is this funny thing because it is essentially using poverty to try and explain away what can obviously be explained away by, capitalism itself, right? If only there was a man in this city who we could point to for why physical retail is going out of business.
Yeah. Weird. Like, everywhere in the world and every retail business is dealing with this problem of brick and mortar stores becoming unviable, and every fucking retail chain is closing stores even before COVID. But, they have to look around the other side of the globe or across the country to ask why. And it's right here for us.
Yeah. Yeah, they should have done that whole bit, like, standing in front of Jeff's balls.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, just astonishingly funny thing. And again, they do this thing the Seattle Times kind of does too, where like when they talk about the Elephant Car Wash specifically, they're like, we talked to the owner. He said he's leaving because of drug use and homelessness and crime, and it's too expensive to be here. It's like, whoa, go back to that one. So I have a sneaky suspicion that it's too expensive to be in downtown Seattle might have more to do with why he's leaving his business than any of the others.
So no wonder when, all these business, whether they're corporate or small business tyrants, who are being driven out by the insane prices and the loss of retail dollars to online. But because they're in this same fucking KOMO Seattle Times media ecosystem, they're also going to throw in, of course, and the poors are making me poor,
Mm-hmm.
It's the presence of poor people that is threatening the viability of our economy. That's the direction that works.
All right, well, let's hear another clip.
This proposal is sponsored by Councilmember Herbold. It is to consider passage of legislation that would allow the dismissal of crimes of poverty, and it would do so by revising the definition of duress as a defense against prosecution.
What exactly does that mean? Well, it means that if someone commits a misdemeanor crime, anything less than a felony or DUI or domestic violence, they could use symptoms of addiction or symptoms of mental illness or symptoms of poverty as a legal defense. Think about that for a moment. You could steal something and simply say, I'm poor, I needed the money. You could steal something and say, give me a break, I have a drug problem. Those would be legal arguments. What kind of crimes are we talking about?
Assaults, harassment, trespass, and everything from sexual exploitation to cyber stalking. Over 100 different crimes listed under the Seattle Municipal Code would effectively be nullified.
Lisa Herbold quoted a city council work group from 2015.
The work group recommended that the city move away from reliance on the criminal legal system to address these behaviors related to poverty, illness, and oppression, and aim to reduce the criminalization of poverty.
I am not aware of any legislation like this anywhere in the United States, even globally. All cities have criminal codes to protect their citizens from criminal acts. This would basically create a legal loophole that swallowed all those codes and said, green light to crime. If you don't feel very protected right now, this would wipe out almost all remaining protections that we have.
Finally, something new. A new cause celeb for the right in the city. Something exciting to sink their teeth into.
Well, and it's probably worth explaining just a bit what the fuck they're going on about, which is a proposal that would allow you, when you get, so when you're Jean Valjean and you get arrested for stealing a loaf of bread and you appear before the magistrate.
The magistrate says, j'accuse.
Yeah. You're allowed to say, I only took the loaf of bread because I was poor. You're still in court. You are still being charged with a crime, and you potentially could still be found guilty. You potentially could still face jail time, right? All you're allowed to do is just throw up a reason, give an excuse, give a reason why this might have happened.
And you're not allowed to do that now.
And you're not allowed to do that now. Yeah, if your lawyer were basically to start going off about how you stole that bread because you're broke as shit, you would be sanctioned by the judge.
Or if lawyers similarly can't say, like, this is a systematic thing. This is, these laws are designed to criminalize poverty, blah, blah, blah. None of this is admissible, and it wouldn't be under this. But that's all this is making this kind of thing admissible to a court. You still have prosecutorial discretion, which, the prosecutors can take this kind of thing into account if they want to, and in some cases they may. And you still have judges who are going to make the decisions they're going to make. So Eric Johnson and Scott Lindsay, who was talking there, are using this to make it sound like the city just wants to abrogate its entire misdemeanor code and, contribute further to the lawlessness. Of course, like everything else, it's just totally fraudulent bullshit.
Yeah, and I mean, to show it's fraudulent, such that they even bring up in an attempt to look nefarious, they even bring up the quote from Pete Holmes when this first got discussed, where our city attorney Pete Holmes basically said, Yeah, this is what my office basically already does, as we try to take into account, like, whether it's really worth, prosecuting somebody essentially for being poor. But the thing is, for the average viewer, I feel like, of KOMO, who has no experience with the criminal justice system in any way, and has about the same understanding of how like the court system works as my cat does, because this should have been Seattle's dying too. They mentioned like Seattle had Seattle PD had 100,000 arrests last year, yet there's not 100,000 people in prison because of it. How do you explain that? And so those things are trying to explain, like, just because you get arrested doesn't mean you go to court, doesn't mean you go to jail, right? There's like it is steps,
and that's not unique to fucking Seattle.
Yeah, that is literally how criminal justice systems work all over the world.
And yet, still in America, a system where that is still the system, we already currently imprison vastly more people than anyone else in the history of man. So maybe when a prosecutor
not good enough.
Yeah, decides it's not worth prosecuting someone, it's probably because it's not worth prosecuting someone, and they probably shouldn't have been arrested in the first place.
Well, I mean, part of the reason that prosecutors have this discretion, and part of the reason judges have it, is that without it, basically, with the number of people that police arrest, I mean, everybody would be in jail. Essentially, we would not have a population anymore. We just have prison guards and inmates.
Yeah, that's exactly what they want.
That's it. Because the police, right? To them, the police are out there trying to do the job, right? They're trying to get the job done, and these people are standing in the way.
Yeah. I mean, police have arrest quotas and all that kind of shit. They'll tell you they don't, but they fucking do. But the thing is that I mean, they're bored. They're doing this shit. In America, you can be arrested for literally anything that you do. And so it's one of those things, like, so part of this reason is because the system wouldn't work. It would break down if it ran the way they wanted to run.
You're already part of the punishment is just getting arrested, spending the nights in jail, having to go to court, incurring the fees. That is already punishment that is, for a lot of these misdemeanors, is already a punishment that is far greater than is deserved.
That you have to face regardless of if you're guilty or not. Like,
exactly, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny too, because when we talk prosecutorial discretion, what they're talking about is you can bring these things up in the case, in a court case, right? I mean, what they're really talking about in this bill is about you can petition the judge, essentially. But the reality is 90% of cases in Seattle never go before a judge, right? The prosecutor basically just tells you could either accept the shit sandwich I'm about to feed you, or I'm going to fucking railroad you. And you are forced to make a choice whether you did anything or not, right? But Cassidy brought up this point of when's enough as far as the prison population. And I mean, that was what I was thinking too, as I watched that, is we already got 2 million people in jail. Is it 3 million? Is this the goal?
That's what's going to fix everything. That's just going to make all the problems go away, as if we bump it from 2 to 3 mil for sure.
Well, our capitalist system creates a surplus population of desperate people. There's nowhere else for them to go until they start building the mining colonies in space to ship all those people off to live and die out, their years on an asteroid. Warehousing them in prison is the answer to these people. And, one of the things we talked about a lot from the very beginning on the show is that, and you were just mentioning this, everything in America is basically illegal. You can be arrested for any million things in the course of your daily life, and that is used to take it out to keep that surplus population, the poorest, most vulnerable population in America, in line, to keep them down, to oppress them. And what's funny about this proposal from, I think it originally came from Herbold, or at least I guess maybe I'm getting that from the KOMO piece. It sort of implies that
everything's been accurate.
Unclear.
Yeah, and everything's been accurate so far.
But basically, this is an attempt to identify that fact that, poor people are criminalized using misdemeanor charges for bullshit, and that also that this crushing economic system pushes people to crimes of survival. This acknowledges that, right? This legislation this proposal acknowledges that. It puts it on the record in the municipal code. It gives a theoretical tool to prosecutors deciding not to charge someone, or because this could be used, and to, if it gets that far, to defense attorneys to bring this up, to bear witness, to make it known in the public record that this person stole this loaf of bread to feed their family, stole, as Pete Holmes brings up, formula to, feed their baby. And that is why it is dumb, and I don't like it, because that's all it does. This is some lib bullshit. Now, I'm not one to say, oh, we shouldn't do things that give ammunition to the right that they'll spin. That's also dumb lib brain shit. That is a bad consequence of this, but that's not why I'm against it. I don't actually care about that. This is like, it doesn't actually do anything like real. It does not address the problems of the criminal justice system. It does not stop the police from, Jesus, look, we've already said this on this episode. Like, if Seattle was really lawless and people were just getting away with anything, there wouldn't be all these fucking people being arrested for shit that, right? Like, at protests and shit. Like, the cops, we already know the cops will arrest you for shit that can't even now be prosecuted because they want to fuck with you. Because they deem you
they can
as an enemy.
Yeah. A lot of arresting is just harassment.
Because they see you as a political or social enemy. Yep.
Yeah.
So whether, say, you're a political radical or you're poor or you're black, they will harass you because they see that as their job. Whether or not you can ultimately be prosecuted. They will harass you. They will arrest you.
They want people to be afraid of them. Like, even if you're not going to have a charge on your record, like, I don't want to fucking deal with that. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, exactly. But this is even worse than that shit.
Right.
This is people actually being charged or potentially charged with some misdemeanor that this is not going to stop, right? This isn't going to stop that. So this is like the old saying about, like, liberals just, don't want to stop injustice. They just want to bear witness to it. And this is like a way for the city council and the city to acknowledge, like, gosh, we really know a lot of our problems are actually to do with, a lot of our supposed crime problems are to do with poverty. And we want to acknowledge that here. But it's not going to change the power or the perspective of the police. There is a lot of power in prosecutorial discretion. And what that means is that power is rooted, even though, Pete Holmes says in this, this reaffirms what we're already doing in my office, theoretically. That tells you that actually that's where the power is in that system. It's with having that prosecutor there. So having this law in there, if you get a, more authoritarian prosecutor next time,
you're fucked.
Because you don't have the power to keep someone like Pete Holmes or better there, because you haven't built that power or maintained it, doesn't do anything for you. And so it doesn't do anything now. It doesn't do anything in the future. It's performative bullshit. It just papers over. It puts lipstick on a small part of a pig that does nothing. So I'm against this bullshit. It's a fucking waste of time.
Well, I think part of it too is it's just acting as if when it comes to the criminal justice system in America, all you have to do is turn the dials on it and find the right mixture.
Yeah.
And the problem is it doesn't acknowledge the actual function of the police and the function of the criminal justice system, which is a system of mass class control, right? I mean, in the U.S., we talk about, like, policing was built off of slavery and from the slave catchers. And sometimes I feel like sometimes we say that it's like, almost empty in the air, when we need to follow up and be like, it's a labor control system. Like, the police are there to make sure you keep fucking working, right? And that you don't ask for anything better. And that's the thing that this, I guess, reform, maybe misses, right, from a left perspective. But of course, from a right perspective, I guess it means that all crime is legal now, and it's just the purge downtown, which they then hilarious. So we'll talk about all the people the cops arrested that week, and it's like, well, is all crime legal, or are the cops arresting people? Which the fuck is it?
Yeah, which one?
Yeah, it's just total dissonance. Like,
it's just all bad vibes. That's all it is.
Yeah. Well, speaking of bad vibes, maybe we should follow with our final clip from the soul of Seattle.
You can't see the fight for the soul of Seattle, but it's down there.
Yeah.
Mark Sidran, the former city attorney, helped Seattle out of a different downtown crisis back in the day. The Frederick and Nelson department store closed in 1992, a staggering blow to an already struggling downtown retail core.
We had to do something, and the mayor and the city council working together, the prosecutors, city and county working together, put together a plan that produced what I think triggered the renaissance that we saw downtown.
A plan. The city went into crisis mode. The mayor and the council brokered a bold public-private partnership that changed our city.
Good evening, everyone. It's a $400 million project affecting 3 city blocks in the heart of downtown's shopping district.
Frederick and Nelson became the new Nordstrom flagship store, and Pacific Place was built. Downtown Seattle blossomed again.
The difference between then and now is that there doesn't appear to be a plan at City Hall that even recognizes the crisis in recovering from COVID if they let the retail business districts, not just downtown, but in our neighborhoods, fail.
Mr. Sidran believes that diversion programs are a tool. He believes social services can be valuable as well. But he's not so naive, nor has he ever been, to think that you can run a city by not stopping anyone from doing anything for any reason at any time.
He has such a spooky, eerie vibe to him. Just wow.
Like so we heard like, oh, you mean, yeah, there was other times previously in Seattle where there were economic downturns where big department stores closed down and vacated their building, but it wasn't because we had a giant homeless population. It was just for some other economic reason, but then we needed to do something so we didn't have a big crime wave. Or like, what are we talking about here? Oh, public-private partnerships for real estate development. Okay, that's really what it is. We actually we're just terrified that the real estate prices won't keep going up. That's what we're actually afraid of. It's having to see the visible pores, but it's at the back of our mind. We're thinking, God, if I can see them, then people thinking about buying this property I own someday will be able to see them. And that might cause the fucking value to actually go down instead of up, or even plateau, you know? So that's what we're talking about. We did some fucking public-private downtown core, business district investment in the 90s, and we're so fucking deluded that we think that is what drove economic prosperity and property prices and development in the city of Seattle. Hilarious.
Not the rise of Microsoft.
Not fucking Microsoft followed by Amazon. Fucking idiot. No, it was some dick twiddling shit with a few $1 million like shoveled out to developers that they could pocket while also just getting rich on their exploding property prices and all the money coming into the area. But that's what they're like, God, we cannot let that stop. We have to keep gentrifying, and we have to keep getting money out the door to developers, because God forbid our housing prices, our property values stop like rising and being a basically bank account with walls and windows for global fucking rich people to store their money in.
Yeah, so this passage seemed to suggest that the soul of Seattle is literally an upscale mall.
The soul of Seattle is the Nordstrom flagship store.
It is.
And Pacific Place, which is a wretched hive of scum and villainy, basically.
Well, and I think the thing, too, is, again, completely missing the point of the resurgence of real estate all over the country and the world, which is that what we saw over the last 40 years was a great economic divergence where essentially all the wealth in the country went to the wealthiest people in the country who had so much money they had to stuff it somewhere, which is why real estate prices have boomed everywhere, right? Which is running out a lot of stuff. And it brings up this kind of interesting thing about what is their vision for a future Seattle. And Charles Mudede actually had a piece on this that I thought was really good, where he said we should stop saying gentrification. We've like passed gentrification, and we're going into actually a new era where we're just going to empty the downtown Seattle core because everything will just be a stash pit for finance, right?
Billionaire urbanism, I think is what he called it.
Yeah. People won't be allowed to live anywhere in these areas because it'll be just the real estate will be too valuable for, renters or owners anymore. And it'll just be a place for some billionaire to dump his cash. And we're actually seeing that in Seattle. We have a record amount of empty apartments and things like that, but they're all at the very high end. We have a record amount of empty houses, but they're all at the very high end. And it's because they're essentially just being used.
Watch Macy's remain vacant for years, but the price of the property never drop.
Yeah.
Think about that.
Yeah, exactly. And it is this sort of truly horrifying, but like obvious where they were going to go with this conclusion of, look, property values have to be protected. They're the number one thing of all. So we have to create this like inverted dystopian It's a Wonderful Life where like, hey, the money is not here. It's in your house, Mark, and it's in your house, Tom. That's why we had to move your ass out of that house and put you in the jail in McNeil Island. Your house is now too valuable for you to be in there, right?
Yeah.
And it's this horrifying dystopic world that capitalism creates all on its own, where it's not fit for human habitation. Right. We could turn Seattle, as Mudady sort of mentions, we could turn Seattle into the most expensive city on earth. That's also the most wealthy city on earth. That's also devoid of any human life whatsoever. And looks like a neutron bomb went off in the middle of it.
Mm-hmm.
And for real estate speculators, that's perfect scenario. And it's just such a fundamentally inhuman vision of the world. Glad that it's broadcast into people's homes and will be probably for the next month over and over again.
Yeah, this will get play online nationally,
Mm-hmm. So we're at 96K right now.
Oh, wow.
So almost as popular as a single episode of Seattle Sucks.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hey,
I've podcasted. I know that's not true.
Cassie. Sound less sarcastic and doubting about this, all right? We're trying to have an image
here. Sorry, guys.
Yeah. Just absolutely repellent way to spend an hour and a half. I feel filthy.
Thanks for watching it, guys.
Hey, no problem. We'd also like to announce
for our listeners,
we're having a big event at the Beacon Cinema showing Seattle's Dime back-to-back with Soul of Seattle. So come on. No, never, do not watch this movie.
Cassidy, thank you for joining us to talk about the Soul of Seattle or whatever from the pile of dog shit that is KOMO.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
We look forward to having you back on to talk about what we plan to talk about, which is big news coming from campaign labor organizing in Washington State.
Yeah, so I would say like the homework for the listeners between now and next week, just like check out the Washington Campaign Workers Collective on Twitter. It's at WA_CWC. And like check out the Bill of Rights, because like that's the main thing we've been working on for the past like month or so. And we sent that to like T-Pod and all the Washington Democrats the week before Election Day. And so there's been a lot of movement happening with that since then. And so we're hoping either like in the next few days or next week, we're going to make a really exciting big announcement. So definitely check out next week's episode.
Yeah, definitely. And it will be a positive episode.
Yes.
Today's episode.
I mean, don't get me wrong. We're definitely going to be like talking shit about a lot of like candidates and campaigns that like are probably beloved. So maybe a little negative, but like we're offering solutions. So that's good.
Yeah. And also it's still a Seattle Sucks episode. So there will be.
Exactly.
Yes. So
always.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to head over to Seattle Sucks Patreon page right now, recently posted the first episode of an ongoing series. Really, it's a sequel to Brian's Mechanical Freak Presents episode on the 1944 DNC, the convention. And it is a new series about Harry Truman and the Cold War. The first episode I listened to the other day. It's excellent. Also, again, like the DNC episode features Justin Roll from Seattle DSA.
Justin.
Cool dude, friend of the show.
One of my Iowa volunteers, too.
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah, Iowa boy. It's this first in the 3-part series is about basically the decision to drop the atomic bombs on Japan and how that was an awful crime against humanity with no real justification, that the American people have been lied to for a century, that was really just about being internationally belligerent for belligerence' sake in order to start the Cold War. Really disturbing, horrifying shit, but they make a very entertaining hour or so talking about it. And then there's going to be more coming on that. That's all on our Patreon.
And stay tuned for a future Patreon episode where I read everyone's birth charts.
Yes.
Cool.
That will also be coming very soon.
Perfect.
And speaking of Patreon, we got 2 new patrons who are going to be able to listen to that episode. We'd like to thank Nathan. I'm not sure this is how you pronounce it, but that's how I'm going to pronounce it, thanks to my watching of The Crucible in high school. Nathan and Giles. So, Giles, stay away from those rocks, I guess. And welcome to the fold.
Yeah, welcome, suckers.
Wait, did you guys give me a shout out when I subscribed or no?
We give everybody a shout out.
Yeah, we always do.
Yeah.
Oh, I wouldn't know. Just kidding.
All right. Well, thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Yep. And with that, we'll say good night. Good night, Seattle.
Good night, Seattle. Keep your soul safe.
Good night to the soul of Seattle.